My own brother is the one that betrays me, my own blood. I'd expect this from my enemy, but when my brother set up this elaborate plan to get my boyfriend to dump me, oh, well, it's time for me to get a bit of revenge on my brother. As the phone rang, the name was familiar and it always brought a smile to my face. Jim, my boyfriend. But as soon as the call was picked up, my life turned upside down as Jim decided to break up with me, and even before announcing his decision, the exact word that he used was cheat. That's right, cheat. The reason behind this, my own terrible brother, let's call him Steve. Jim's voice shook as he told me. He did not expect me to be like that, but on my side, my hand started trembling, all because of my own brother. Brother from the same mother Andy calls the havoc in my life. Steve was born 3 years earlier than me, and it's hard to believe he was my brother. Since none of our characteristics matched, Steve always behaved as a big brother, having the negative traits that one could have. As an older one, we both went to the same school, but not until junior high. We both had the same building, and those years were the worst days of my life. To make things worse, Steve would just casually roam near our class and fill the ears of my classmates about my embarrassing incident, which would soon become a hot topic in my class. No one would know that Steve had a sister since we both acted as if we didn't know each other. And trust me, that was the best solution for a brother who did not care about your existence. Even a dime. Well, back at home, Steve was the best child for mom and dad, and never ever did their elder son have a fault at anything. The golden child, you could say. Rather, it was always me. One day mom and dad were out for some work, and it was only Steve and me in the home. But both were in separate rooms, and Steve never usually came to talk or even asked for food. He would just enjoy snacks alone and order or call for something and to share unless I'd go and ask. So enjoying playing games on my computer. There was no track of time for me when all of a sudden something touched my nose. It was a smell of something burning, getting down from my chair. I followed the smell to the kitchen where this 3-year-old big boy, who apparently had all the knowledge in the world, had put steel, that's right, metal, right inside the microwave. The thing caught fire inside of the microwave as Steve tried pressing buttons, but nothing was working. He looked at me and asked me to try to stop the thing so he can grab a bucket of water. It was no time for squirrels, so this instruction was followed. Steve shouted from the washroom to keep pressing the off button, and that exact thing was done. But to my shock, nothing was working. Instead, the flame inside was growing bigger, and then as soon as Steve came running with one of the buckets, the thing blew up. Half of the kitchen turned black, including my face, and for a moment, the world seemed to be ending for me. That's right. When mom and dad returned and heard the doorbell, Steve ran to tell them how all of it was my fault. Mom and dad were more upset about the accident that might have blown up the whole house than any danger that might have occurred to me. I spent the whole day trying to convince them. And Steve did it, but they had just too much faith in their first child. Let it be in movies or in real worlds, or even in my school. Brothers were not usually so bad. They were good, meant to protect their sibling, but Steve wasn't like them. Steve was always jealous of my grades and achievements, and always the fact that I had 2 great friends in my school, well, who later went to different towns. At times, having Steven in my life, no one needed enemies with a brother like him. But what he did was beyond my imagination. Meeting Jim was one of the best things of my life. He came at a time when life was hard and I just officially fell in love twice, once in high school and once with Jim. High school love never went well, and same was just slapped on my head as the boy was looking for a casual show-off type and broke off a few months into the relationship. Well, that did punch me in the guts, but I moved on and went ahead with life from there on. Several years passed, and there was not a single boy who felt nice and lovable. Or maybe my heart was afraid to repeat the same mistake again. Jim joined my office at the same time I did, but we didn't meet each other for more than a month. When we did, we connected well, but our happy relationship was on the brink of falling. As Jim called and told me that he found out how I was cheating on him with another guy, saying, so he cut the call clearly. He too was shocked after what he said. I took a few deep breaths and called him back and asked him what made him think so. To which Jim stuttered at first and didn't want to say anything but shouted how hurt he felt. But we spent a good long time together, so I knew what would bring out the information. So when we said that Jim was lying and he had no proof, the male ego was hurt and he revealed it was Steve, the same culprit. Jim's voice broke as he reminded me of the day. We promised to have each other's back as we crossed 1 year of our relationship. The same things were running like a flashback in my mind as well. My next attempt was to defend myself by constantly saying the same thing, that not even in the wildest dreams. There was another man who came even closer to me ever while we both were together. Jim was a great guy. He had all those qualities any girl would want her boyfriend to have. Looks, a deep voice. Apart from all those, he also had a character and was brilliant in his work. Jim would always mention that he hated lies, all the qualities that a girl would love to have in her man. But on the flip side, Jim would easily believe anything anyone said, and that was something that would make me mad. At times, he'd even be overpossessive and just try to know every detail of what I've even been up to and doing all day. All these went through my mind as we talked over the phone. Jim was again ready to cut the call short, but after a lot of requesting, he stayed back for a moment, We both felt silent owing hearing the breathing of one another, not sure what to say next. And at that moment, Jim revealed that Steve told him that the other day I was not at home and went secretly to meet the man I was having an affair with. Like every other day, I'd get up and open my Messenger app to send him a good morning text or to have a casual conversation. But a few days back, Jim was offline, and that made me skip the morning text since I was in a hurry to visit a pet shop just to buy a gift for Mom's upcoming birthday. Upon returning, Steve gave me a creepy smile and later told me that Jim had called on his phone. Jim revealed that Steve told Jim about how he followed me and saw me with another guy. This was news and it shocked me as I fought my way through arguing. I was at the pet shop on hearing this, and Jim's anger broke just a tiny bit as I felt by his voice. Next, Jim forwarded me the text message from Steve, which he wrote to Jim on particular days, saying how he saw and heard me talking to some other guy late at night. Jim, being the idiot that he was, he believed Steve. He even more so since Jim slept and we didn't even talk so late at night, which made Steve's point even more strong. You see, his arguments were pointless, and as my rage was increasing, Jim understood my mood, was not happy, but totally frustrated with his points. He began to get caught. Finally, he admitted it had been 2 months since Steve was standing him. Such things. And the main evidence Steve gave Jim from where his doubts began was on the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, 2 months back. The date rang bells in my ears, and that finally made me understand what Steve wanted and why he did all of it. 2 months back, well, on February the 14th, me and Jim made plans to go out. Steve too had a plan to go out with his girlfriend, let's call her Lee. Right in the morning while Mom was still venting out how we both stayed at their house. While all her friends' children had already bought their own apartments to the least, the doorbell rang. It was a big teddy bear delivered by a man in a red dress. The gift was given by none other than Jim, while Mom and Dad had no problem with the gift. Steve looked upset and the reason was also clear. Lee not only forgot the day of Valentine's, but that was also Steve's birthday. He just simply could not hold it together anymore and said to Mother, he hates Lee. But Mom and Dad both hugged and tried to comfort him by saying he should not get mad on his birthday, instead calling her and getting out of her a date or something. And by then I was too happy with my big gift to be bothered about anything, and that handwritten letter was even more sweet. We had planned for a movie, so I rushed to take a shower upon my return. Steve was standing near my bed just reading the letter, which by the way was quite unusual. But his face had a hint of hate for my gift. Seeing me quickly, he just walked away, and nobody wanted him to be there in the first place too. I wore my red one piece and added the cologne that Jim loved, being all dolled up and ready. I was walking out when something stopped me near Steve's room. A clear shout was heard, followed by a rant. It was Steve. He was shouting at Lee, and the little gap through the doors showed he threw his phone on the bed. Right at that moment, a message from Jim came on my phone, and reading it, a broad smile came to my face, but that's made things worse. As Steve came running out of his room, sensing my presence, and he started shouting, what was my reason for smiling? I immediately walked away and put on my shoes. But he stood near his room and just shouted that he's going to make sure I paid back for my laughing at his unfortunate luck. My day with Jim was much more than what could have been asked for with a movie, coupled with his hug in the theater, and later a candle at dinner. After returning home, the first thing that would have caught anyone's attention is crying. Steve. Yeah, my big brother was crying, sulking on the sofa as Mother sat beside him. Apparently his girlfriend did not show up as it was planned later. Mother gave her a call, but she came and both had a fight. Hearing it all, I just wanted to say something and comfort Steve, but nothing came out of my mouth. But Steve did look at me with hungry red eyes, and me grinded his teeth, as if ready to devour me and my luck, while already mad my big brother. I asked Jim to forward what he had sent to Jim on February 14th, and Jim gave me a video and a text message. The video showed a small necklace kept on my table. That's who recorded when the room was empty, trying to fake it, that another man also gave me a gift that morning. A note said how Steve saw her with 2 gifts and doubted that his sister, whom he cared about, might be cheating on Jim. Somehow I defended myself from the fake piece of evidence too, and told Jim that all of it was false. We just both talked our way out of it. Today in the morning, gathering my courage, a decision was made. A decision to face it was to face Steve and ask him why he did all of it. Although it was clear he wasn't happy with his own relationship, which was definitely failing. But what gave him the right to portray me as a cheater? Mom and Dad. Well, they both went out for work and Steve was having his breakfast in front of the TV. That was the right moment for me to take advantage. So taking the opportunity, my legs dragged me near the television set as my hands just followed my angry mind and switched the television off. Steve wasn't happy, but he just tried to shoo me away and tried to switch it back on with the remote. But then I asked why he lied to Jim. Hearing it, he relaxed a bit back into the sofa as if he expected the drama coming his way. What lie? He asked calmly. No time was wasted in extra words, but I asked him why. He said my boyfriend, that I was cheating on him with another man. Well, Steve was just not ready to accept his deeds right when he was at a pointed out in the eye that he was jealous and that his relationship with his dear girlfriend was not so dear and lovely, having been hurt. He finally opened his mouth and said that he knew that there was something fishy about me and that indeed I was in another affair while cheating on Jim. so he tried to save Jim and nothing else. Well, that's made me mad and I forwarded him everything he sent to Jim and pointed out each and every text that they proved it was wrong, but only if it were of any help looking at me. Steve said, "Yeah, man, Jim really is a fool. I told him to wait until I've taken a clear picture of you both. But bad luck with the poor guy." That snapped a part of me as I threw away the remote from his hand and told him that if he came between me and my boyfriend ever again, he will lose his love. Steve did not have a hint of fear. He went to the extent of posting the false videos and pieces of evidence on the internet, and will make it go viral if I ever disturb him like that again. He says, "Wow." I went away from there and spent the evening crying in my room. Mom and Dad returned home and they obviously knew everything was fine except for how evil their son was. Food did not even touch my lips. My stomach just starts growling, but there was no wish to eat. Jim called a few hours back and his tone seemed low and dull, and soon the reason was revealed. He once again felt confused. Jim wasn't sure if he wanted to continue anymore, and the same thing began repeating again. My heartbeat increased as the same questions were asked to him. Why and what happened? So suddenly his voice lacked the rage he had yesterday night, but it even lacked the energy. The same energy Jim had when he loved me, touched me, kissed me, and when he proposed to me first. I spent the next half an hour trying to talk it out, but Jim's mind was telling him that we should not, or we both just can't be together anymore. Upon asking further, he finally said it. He still wasn't sure if his own girlfriend was being loyal to him. Well, that struck me that he believed Steve somewhere deep down and thought all the evidence was right. Well, you could say my mood quickly elevated as I got angry and start shouting. While my tears were just nonstop flowing, I asked Jim if he believed me or Steve even more than his love, to which he remained silent, which was not helping the situation at all. Jim always went with the flow, but never did that make me imagine that he'd believe anyone to turn against me. He was beginning to look like a total idiot to me. Jim was still convinced, well, not convinced, and his lack of trust was seen as his voice was not rising, but constantly remained low. If he could not believe me, then there was just absolutely no point of continuing the relationship together. John was possessive, but he was also really caring, lovable and charismatic. He wanted to be a part of every bit of my life, but that wasn't helping our situation at all, rather revealing his lack of trust in people and me. All these thoughts made me fall silent as Jim was the only one who suddenly started talking about a second chance, but the idea just felt dead to me. I cut the call and switched it off and spent the night crying and thinking about what I've gotten myself into, and while thinking all about it, my mind promised to plot some revenge from my loving sweet brother, Steve, and make him and his relationship repaid for what life they took away from me. Update number 1, 1 week later. Hey guys, it's almost been a week passed away and life wasn't what it was before. Jim was no more in my life. The last time that we were both talking on the call, my mind did just shout that it was enough, and Jim somewhere did not deserve another chance. If someone doesn't believe a person, there's no point for a second chance. So the next morning at around 10 in the morning, I lay there with my eyes wide open to void of a drop of sleep. Suddenly heard a notification. It was Jim. He texted just one line, whether we both were breaking up or not, and he finally got the answer. He was dying to get. Or maybe not. It was a big fat yes. Not even in my wildest dreams did the thought of us breaking up ever pop up. But there we are, separated and single. Although not me, I had enough affair. According to Jim, my stomach ground. But it wasn't out of hunger, it just churned out of extreme pain. Nothing happened and followed by silence. Steve won. He won in what he wanted, just like in our childhood. He got board games. Were usually a part of our family's pastime on Sundays. And if the season was summer, we four would sit outside in the garden with some sort of apple juice and play. You see, Steve would always get the lead to roll the dice or pull the string or whatever it was. And Steve was competitive. His selfishness was reflected well in games too. Mom and Dad, not to mention, always preferred his way, not mine, and as usual. But the worst habit of Steve was to win it. We four would start the game on a good note, but the ending depended on Steve's mood. His motive was to win every single match, and from the moment his victory seemed impossible, he'd just start behaving rudely towards everybody. If his victory was taken away by none other than me, that boy was ready to show the worst in his behavior. It was once. Both of us needed just one good card to win the game. After a lot of draws back and forth, finally I got the card I needed in my special victory dance, and ratched him. Steve, later, rushed out the area, went to my room, and right in front of her eyes, broke off my favorite toy and ran away laughing. That's the day it told me that Steve could never be anybody's good big brother or friend. 5 days after breaking up for the first time, I had something outside soup and it did not taste that great. Life just didn't feel so good either, but that was not the case for Steve in the evening of the same day when I was only one at the home. Mom came rushing inside and she was absolutely jumping with joy without even caring to know what happened. She rushed to the kitchen to find something. I followed her, and upon asking, she said that her son had proposed to his girlfriend at a restaurant right in front of Mom and Dad, and said that Steve had announced his wedding, saying so. She left. Well, the door swung and closed behind her, and her words still ringing in my ears. Steve broke my relationship and was preparing for his own marriage. That news absolutely enraged me as my mind was still blank and nothing came as suddenly. Just a wish, a very small wish, that he never got happy ever saying. So I went back to my room to let the universe take care of what he's done to me. Karma. Update number 2. Hey guys, this update should not have been written in the first place, but people are idiots. And so Steve, my dear brother, apparently went out telling everyone that he was so sorry for my breakup and using this technique. He told every one of our relatives how terrible of a breakup was. It was just eating at my mental health day by day, and the best news was delivered to his marriage. His cunning and devilish nature just could not help but plan for revenge. People like him deserve it, you know, but he must just not give back what he gave. He must also get it in front of everyone. I made the plan that his marriage was the best day to ruin his day and life together, so I decided to do that. Steve could not be easily brought down at home since he had the support of our parents, so what was needed was some clues to something that he's done. And I mean something absolutely terrible. My days were just the same as any other. The breakup had made it hard to even get up and go to the office. I did start going to work after 5 long days of lying about stomach pain. But this week too, I could barely go 3 days and my morning headaches were excruciating. One day lying on my bed, my mind could not help but think how Steve tore me apart, and suddenly something just popped into my brain. Steve, I remember he always had a diary, a little secret. Well, he wrote everything about his life, a diary that could help me find something. Thus the mission started to find it when the house was empty, slowly. I crept into his room and it felt as if I was committing a crime and a sense of fear loomed above my head since, you know, he always hated when I stepped inside the room and shouted. Yeah, his room was a mess. But even in that mess, there was his cupboard, which had the doors ajar, and right on the second shelf, laid an old book, an old diary. The next hour was spent reading everything. It mostly had pictures of female artists, movies, and some days they had notes written. But one page, one very, very specific page, absolutely completed my research. The day was 5th of September, almost 10 years back. The handwriting showed that he was anxious as if he was in a hurry. My big brother apparently had hit somebody with his car and ran away from the scene. He even wrote about it. No one except for his girlfriend and one friend knew about it, and both were 2 of his terrible friends. Steve was even a bit drunk and not sure, but might have hit a lady's short height. And after hitting her, he ran away and his car not even bothered to check and see if she was okay. He used his power and sources just to delete the evidence and even have narratives ready if the cops ever chased him down or questioned him. But he faced no consequences. My hands were cold and clammy reading this terrible thing that he did. It was so hard to even believe. He was such a monster who went around all these years without even showing a hint of guilt for what he's done. It was really shocking. But my brother did not know that his past was to be revealed. Arranging numbers of the place he was going to be married. I had a look at the events and my plan was set. Oh, now it's time to wait. Wait for the wedding update number 3. This is the final post by Pete. So Stevie was quick. Steve was very quick enough to announce his marriage, and why not when someone's insecure about their love, right? His girlfriend had planned to get married 4 times in the last 2 years, but she was the one who always bailed with cold feet. This time Steve had his marriage just a couple weeks after he gave her the ring. That was helpful since it gave me a few days to prepare. The task was not so easy, especially since the manager of the place was too strict to tell me anything, as Steve had instructed me to be very careful regarding any issues. Even after a lot of requests, nothing was working, but there was a man who might have heard me. He worked as a bartender at the counter during the events. A couple of dollar bills led him to the event plan, and then a couple more dollar bills. Everything was set. The day of the marriage arrived. The day Steve was to repent for his deeds. Steve was helped get ready by father while mother was too overjoyed that she gave up her sleep and eating for her lovely son, who by the way, was also a criminal behind the curtains. We all got into a decorated car and reached the church. The scene gave me memories of Jim for no reason. And it's the same memories, which only brought tears. Finally, everybody gathered in the church and thankfully one of the walls of the church had a projector. And as people were busy chatting amongst themselves, the projector got switched on by none other than the man who was set. Oh, thanks to that lovely bartender who led me to all these people. Well, a video starts playing and it showed a text message that I carefully created. And it was from my dear brother stating the exact date and time he hit somebody with a car and left, and just to prove it came to the video following footage of it. And in that footage I showed myself showing everybody his diary, and how he wrote his dark history inside of it. The video was playing and he started turning summited me, but most towards Steve. His face had turned a bright red as his fiancée by then had covered her face and might have started crying. Mom and Dad grabbed Steve and walked away from there. As people started leaving their seats, I also left the place and did not even turn around to see what followed. I returned home and took a seat on the sofa and I enjoyed myself at night. 3 of them, while they returned. The wedding was called off by the in-laws and my mom and dad. Not so surprisingly, they were completely mad at me. They shouted, they cursed, but luckily that did not last for very long as they shifted their attention back to their baby boy, who by the way was laying on his bed crying. His face calmed me down, and well, it screamed for help. The same help I screamed for, but I still lost my boyfriend. People indeed needed a bold reply to make them understand where to hit their limits. Steve might be mad at me even thinking of, well, hurting me, but now he knows not to mess with me ever again. Steve might even face some legal consequences for what he's done in this old hit-and-run case. Alright, guys, I'll be honest with this story. To me, this might sound rude, but I think Steve was just an idiot. I mean, first of all, if you do a crime like that and you're actually trying to get away with, I don't know, running somebody over with your car while you're drunk, do you think that you would write it in a diary? And besides, I don't even know if that would be enough evidence to convict somebody since it's just writing. Anyways, that's beside the point. That guy was a bad person. He was a creep.